On July 6, 2013, Asiana Airlines Flight 214 crashed while attempting to land at San Francisco International Airport. The crash, which could have been far worse, resulted in 3 fatalities, but the majority of the 307 passengers and crew survived. So, what went wrong that day? What caused this disaster? Let's take a closer look at the events leading up to the crash and break down the main causes. Every airplane has a critical phase during landing called the approach. This is when the aircraft begins to descend towards the runway. Pilots must manage this phase carefully, making sure the plane is at the correct speed and altitude. If the plane is too high, too low, or off course, the landing can become dangerous. This phase is crucial, and small errors can lead to serious problems. For Asiana Airlines Flight 214, the approach went wrong almost from the beginning. When the flight crew started the descent, they didn't manage the glide path correctly. The glide path is a specific angle of descent that the plane needs to follow to reach the runway safely. If the plane is too steep or too shallow, it can either land too early or overshoot the runway. In this case, the aircraft was much higher than it should have been at key points during the descent. Normally, the plane should be at a certain altitude and distance from the runway, but the pilots didn't bring the aircraft down at the right time. Instead of correcting the problem and trying a go-around, which is when pilots decide to abandon the landing attempt and try again, the flight crew continued with the descent. They were aware of the warnings from the plane's systems that showed they were too low and too slow. However, they didn't take immediate action to pull up or adjust their approach. If they had decided to go around at this stage, they could have avoided the dangerous situation they found themselves in. But by continuing with the descent, they only got closer to the ground, putting the plane at greater risk of crashing. The go-around is a standard procedure used in aviation when pilots feel something is wrong with the approach. When the plane isn't positioned correctly for landing, the pilots can opt to go around and try the landing again. This procedure would have been ideal for Asiana Flight 214, but the pilots didn't choose to do so. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, the crew missed an important opportunity to make that decision early enough to save the aircraft. At the time of the crash, the pilots had been flying for several hours and were under pressure to land. Aviation experts often point out that pilots need to be prepared for any situation, especially during a critical moment like this. The stress of landing, coupled with poor management of the descent, led to a chain of events that ended in disaster. It's easy to assume that experienced pilots would automatically know what to do in such a situation, but even seasoned professionals can make mistakes when they're under pressure. By continuing the approach despite clear warnings that they were off track, the pilots made a series of small errors that built up. They did not have enough time to recover once they reached a dangerous altitude. At just 500 feet above the ground, the pilots should have been much more focused on their speed, altitude, and trajectory. However, the failure to manage these aspects properly led to their plane being dangerously close to the runway, and in a position where they couldn't pull up in time. One of the critical issues during the crash of Asiana Airlines Flight 214 was the failure of the auto-throttle system. This system is designed to automatically control the speed of the aircraft during flight, adjusting engine power to ensure the correct speed is maintained. It works as an additional safety feature, especially during crucial phases like approach and landing. Auto-throttle helps ensure that the plane remains at a safe and consistent speed, which is vital when pilots are managing other complex tasks. On Flight 214, however, the pilots accidentally deactivated the auto-throttle system during the approach. This caused the engines to idle, reducing thrust and speed. The plane was no longer receiving the power it needed to stay on the correct glide path and maintain its descent rate. Without the necessary speed, the plane began to descend too quickly and at an unsafe angle, causing the pilots to struggle to control the descent. They did not realize that the auto-throttle had been turned off, which led to a dangerous situation that escalated quickly. Had the auto-throttle system remained active, the plane's engines would have continued to adjust their speed, ensuring that the aircraft stayed on the correct glide path for landing. When the auto-throttle is functioning properly, it keeps the plane at a steady speed by adjusting the engine's thrust. This helps pilots focus on other critical tasks during the approach, such as monitoring altitude and handling the aircraft's position in the air. Unfortunately, without it, the plane was losing speed and the pilots were unable to correct it in time. This failure of the auto-throttle system highlights how small mistakes or oversights can have serious consequences. The system itself is designed to make flying safer, but in this case, turning it off unintentionally caused the pilots to lose critical speed, leading to the crash. Auto-throttle is a vital tool that assists pilots in maintaining safe speeds, and its failure shows just how much trust pilots put into these systems. A single, simple mistake led to a chain of events that ultimately resulted in tragedy. When systems like auto-throttle are misused or misunderstood, it shows just how important pilot training is in handling these complex technologies. If the pilots had been more familiar with the system, they might have recognized the issue sooner and taken action before it was too late. Technology is supposed to support pilots, but when pilots don't fully understand how to use it, it can quickly become a hidden danger. The go-around decision is one of the most important choices a pilot can make when they realize a landing is going wrong. For Asiana Airlines Flight 214, the pilots waited far too long before attempting a go-around, and this delay played a huge role in the crash. At just 1.5 seconds before impact, the flight crew decided to try to abandon the landing attempt and pull the plane up. But by this point, the plane was already so close to the ground and had lost so much speed that the decision came too late for the maneuver to succeed. When a go-around is needed, pilots must act quickly. Typically, a go-around involves increasing engine thrust, climbing to a higher altitude, and circling back to attempt the landing again. The timing of this decision is critical. It has to be made well in advance of impact. In this case, the pilots failed to make that decision in time, and the plane struck a seawall just short of the runway. Moments before the crash, the cockpit voice recorder captured warnings from the plane's systems, including a stall warning and a message to increase speed. These alerts are meant to warn pilots that the plane is about to lose lift and that immediate corrective actions are necessary. Despite these warnings, the flight crew did not take action until it was too late. This failure to act earlier is a tragic example of how crucial timing is in aviation safety. If the pilots had initiated the go-around earlier, it might have prevented the crash. The delayed decision to go around raises the question of how much stress and pressure can influence pilot decision-making. Pilots are trained to act quickly and make the best choices under pressure, but sometimes, in the heat of the moment, the right decision doesn't come fast enough. In this case, the pilot's delay to go around, combined with other factors, led to an irreversible situation where the plane could not be saved. It's a stark reminder of how important it is to make the right decisions at the right time. Asiana Flight 214 was a modern aircraft, a Boeing 777, which is equipped with some of the most advanced aviation technology in the world. These systems, including the autopilot and auto-throttle, are designed to make flying safer and easier for pilots. However, the complexity of these systems can sometimes cause confusion, especially when pilots are not fully trained or familiar with how they operate. In this case, the flight crew faced difficulties understanding and properly managing the aircraft's systems. While advanced technologies like autopilot are designed to take over some of the workload from pilots, they can also introduce new challenges. For example, if pilots are not fully trained on how to handle specific situations involving these systems, they can easily make mistakes. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, found that the pilot's lack of experience and familiarity with the Boeing 777 systems contributed significantly to the crash. The auto-throttle and autopilot systems are designed to assist pilots in maintaining a steady speed and heading, but they require constant attention and understanding. When these systems are engaged, they control much of the plane's functions, but the pilots must still monitor them closely. If there's a misunderstanding or the system is unintentionally deactivated, like what happened with the auto-throttle, the results can be disastrous. This accident showed how even the most experienced pilots can struggle when confronted with systems they don't fully understand or are not adequately trained to handle. This complexity in modern aircraft systems is not unique to Asiana Flight 214. Over the years, there have been other incidents where pilots have faced difficulties with advanced technology. This highlights the need for comprehensive training on new aircraft systems. Pilots need to be well-versed not just in flying the plane manually, but also in handling the technology that's supposed to make flying easier. Without this knowledge, pilots can easily become overwhelmed when things go wrong. Fatigue is a common issue for pilots, especially on long flights with multiple time zones and extended hours of duty. On the day of the Asiana Flight 214 crash, the flight crew had been on duty for a significant amount of time before the accident, and fatigue may have affected their performance. The NTSB's investigation suggested that the pilots were likely tired, which may have impaired their ability to make the best decisions under stress. Fatigue is a serious concern in aviation, as it can slow reaction times, make it harder to focus, and affect decision-making abilities. Pilots are trained to stay sharp and vigilant, but after hours of flying and dealing with complex situations, it can become harder to stay focused. In this case, the pilot's fatigue likely contributed to their delayed response when they realized the approach was going wrong. Fatigue can also impact communication, which is vital in a high-pressure situation like this. Clear communication among the flight crew is crucial during all stages of flight, especially during critical moments like landing. In the case of Flight 214, there were moments when the pilots did not communicate clearly with each other. This lack of effective communication may have caused confusion and contributed to their poor decision-making. For example, the pilots failed to discuss or agree on the need for a go-around early enough to prevent the crash.
We were about the same level of water. And I see the runway starts right there. And I was looking through this window. There's no runway, but I see the water about the same level.
What did you think at that moment?
We're crashing.
When the plane hit the ground, it caused massive damage, with the tail section completely torn off and the aircraft catching fire. Despite the severity of the crash, the survival rate was remarkably high. Around 98% of the people on board survived the accident, a testament to the effectiveness of the evacuation efforts. The chaos and danger of the situation did not stop the passengers and crew from acting quickly. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, helping with evacuations despite the smoke and flames. The survivors' ability to remain calm and follow procedures in such a dire moment was crucial. This event highlighted the importance of training and preparedness in emergency situations. Although tragic, it was a powerful example of human resilience and teamwork. Unfortunately, the crash did result in fatalities. 3 passengers lost their lives. 2 were ejected from the aircraft during the impact, and a 3rd was tragically run over by emergency vehicles as they responded to the scene. These deaths were a tragic reminder of how quickly things can go wrong, even when most of the passengers survive. What do you think helped the majority of the passengers survive? Perhaps it was the fast action of the flight attendants and emergency responders, or maybe the plane's design that allowed people to evacuate quickly. Either way, the crash served as a stark reminder of the importance of safety measures in aviation. What did we learn from Flight 214? Asiana Airlines. Flight 214 is often studied by aviation experts as a case of how critical it is to manage an aircraft's descent properly, stay aware of all systems in use, and communicate effectively under pressure. The pilot errors that led to the crash weren't just random mistakes. They were the result of several factors coming together. Mismanagement of the descent, accidental deactivation of the autothrottle, a delayed go-around decision, confusing aircraft systems, and fatigue all played a part in this tragedy. Together, these issues highlighted the need for better training, more attention to detail, and more focus on communication in the cockpit. Even though the crash could have been much worse, it still led to the loss of lives and many more injuries. It raised important questions about safety in aviation and pushed for better cockpit training, more reliable systems, and better ways to handle fatigue. When it comes to flying, safety is always the top priority. The story of Flight 214 is a sobering reminder that aviation is incredibly complex, and even small mistakes can have serious consequences. But it also shows how important training, communication, and effective decision-making are when things go wrong. What's clear from this crash is that every moment counts when flying a plane. Pilots and crew must stay alert, manage all systems properly, and make quick, informed decisions when the situation is critical. As aviation continues to improve, It's crucial to remember the lessons learned from accidents like this one. And hopefully, those lessons will help prevent future tragedies and keep air travel as safe as possible for everyone on board.